Has it ever happened to you that your car radio is not up to your needs? The sound quality is terrible, nowhere to plug in your phone, and things are just falling apart and misaligned. Well, in this episode, I'll be showing you how to go from this to this, right after this. So the first thing to do is to take out the loose compartment and the ashtray. Next, the two screws holding the shift knob can be unscrewed and the shift knob removed. Behind the ashtray, there are 3 hidden screws that need to be unscrewed. And all the side screws on the center console panel and the armrest. Under the handbrake, there's a little panel that needs to be removed to expose 2 hidden screws. Then the armrest can be taken out and the button for the fog lights unplugged. Lastly, the shifter panel can be taken out. And now the radio's main box can be taken out with the use of a radio extractor tool, which usually comes with the new aftermarket radios. The metal frame can be gently wiggled out. The wiring loom is a complete mess of electrical tape and wires, and they are badly put together. This could be a potential fire hazard, so we're going to fix it first. But before we do anything to the wiring harness, the negative terminal of the battery needs to be unplugged to avoid shorting anything. But now let's pause the time lapse here for just a second. Let's fast forward a little bit, and I'd like to show you how to properly solder and insulate 2 wires. There's a wide range of different methods to solder wires, but the one I'm going to use now is the most basic. First, cut some heat shrink tubing 2 to 3 centimeters in length and thread it onto one of the wires. Trim both ends of the wires you're going to solder and use wire strippers or a knife to strip both wire ends around 1 centimeter each. Now thread the copper threads of the 2 wires together and begin to twist them so they hold together temporarily. Set aside the connected wires and apply some flux to the exposed copper. Now once the soldering iron is hot, apply a little bit of solder onto the end of the iron and place it under the exposed wires. Wait until the flux melts and you can visibly see that the solder from the iron is beginning to be absorbed by the copper threads. Now you can slowly feed the solder into the wires in order to fully cover the connections like so. Try not to breathe the smoke as it is toxic. Clean up the iron with a moist sponge after you're done and add some more solder to the tip to preserve it for the future and let it cool somewhere safe. Once the connection is cool, place the heat shrink over the connection and use either a heat gun or a hairdryer. In this case, I'll be using a heat gun and I'll set it to 140 degrees Celsius. Make sure to apply the heat all around the heat shrink to fully insulate the connection you just soldered. And this is how you properly solder and insulate 2 wires. Now let's get back to the time lapse. After everything is soldered and heat shrunk, the wires can be trimmed to an equal length. Next, I'm going to use some male type connectors with heat shrink to insulate it and protective boot. First, each wire needs to be stripped around 2 mm and the boot and the heat shrink threaded in. Then with the help of a special crimp tool, I'm going to secure the male connector to the wire. The connector has 2 little fins at the front and back. The inner fin, when crimped, needs to be crimped over the exposed copper, and the outer fin needs to be crimped onto the insulation of the wire. Now, after crimping the connectors and shrinking the heat shrink over each one, now we can get to the radio wiring harness. This radio harness came together with the new radio, but in some cases you might need to buy it separately. The universal radio connection, which is used in most cars from the 90s, can be cut off completely, and each end of the wire stripped by around 2 mm. A piece of heat shrink is placed onto each wire, and the female connector can be crimped onto each end. And now that everything is done, we can plug in the radio adapter to the car's wiring harness. Before you plug in anything, it is important to double check which wire plugs into what. On some radios at the bottom of the box there is a diagram with the list of what wire does what, or you could check online for a specific radio make. And for the wire harness in the car, the owner's manual could have the wire diagram, or online you can find it for a specific make and model. This step is important as incorrectly plugging in a wire can potentially damage the radio or something in the car, so do this step carefully. For me, luckily, the wires match the colors of the plug, so it's easy to know what wire is what, but you might not be as lucky, so be cautious. After we plug in the unit and put back the negative terminal of the battery, we can check if everything has been connected correctly.
Yay!
The sound comes out from all the speakers and everything is functional. Now we can tug in the cables back to the sleeve and tie them all up together with some cable ties. I'm also going to install a single DIN aftermarket compartment, which you might remember I used to have in the Morningstar. Since there's no proper way to mount it to the car, I had to figure out a way to do it with some brackets and screws. So here I connected 2 brackets on each side and then test fitted them to the car. And after some serious adjustments to the L brackets, the compartment can finally be installed to the console. Then the metal frame for the radio can be fitted and secured in place. And finally, the wire harness and the antenna can be plugged in into the radio box, and the box pushed in into its place, and the cover frame and the front face of the radio clipped in. After this whole install, the car needs to be vacuum cleaned from all the wire remains and strips, and before putting all the panels back together, it's a good time to clean them thoroughly, as now we have easier access to all the crevices. After the cleanup, all the surrounding panels are installed back to the car. And here's the final result. Now finally I can listen to my favorite music whilst driving. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, give it a like, and if you found it helpful, give it a share and spread it to the world. Of course, don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. If you liked and want to buy any of the tools I'm using in this video, down in the description below I'll have affiliate links where you can find them. This way you can also help out the channel a great deal. Once again, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.